My name is Alice Montgomery. I'm 28 years old, and I plan events for a living. I create perfect days for other people. It's what I'm good at. My life is a series of checklists, contracts, and timelines. I thrive on order and control. Maybe that's because for most of my life, I had none. My story, begins with a text message. It arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. A single buzz from my phone that managed to slice right through the calm I had so carefully constructed. I was sitting at my desk reviewing a floral invoice for a client. The scent of coffee hanging in the air of my small office. The screen lit up with my sister's name. Chloe. I smiled, expecting another last-minute demand or a picture of a dress she couldn't decide on. Instead, I saw a sentence that was so cold and concise. It felt like a shard of glass. There's no place for you at the wedding anymore. Sorry. I read it once, then a second time. My breath caught in my throat. The letters seemed to rearrange themselves, trying to form a sentence that made sense. But they kept snapping back into the same cruel formation. No place for you. Months of work flashed through my mind. The late nights negotiating with caterers, the weekends spent touring venues, the thousands of dollars of my own money I'd put down on deposits, all framed as gifts to my perfect golden sister. All of it erased in 10 little words. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the keyboard, but I couldn't think of a single thing to type back. My heart was pounding. A frantic, trapped bird against my ribs. A hollow feeling spread through my chest, cold and vast. This was it. The moment I had always dreaded and somehow expected. The final undeniable proof that I was not a sister. Not a daughter, but a resource to be used and discarded. They had uninvited me. They had fired me from my own family. What Chloe didn't know, what none of them knew, was that in their haste to discard me, they had overlooked one small detail. I wasn't just the planner. I wasn't just the sister. I was the client. Every single contract. Every agreement. Every dollar holding her perfect day together was legally tied not to her, but to my business. To me. They thought they had cut me out. They had no idea they had just handed me the scissors. To understand how a single text message could hold the weight of a lifetime, you have to understand my family. In the Montgomery household, there were 2 daughters, but only one star. That was Chloe. She was born shining. Or at least that's how my parents saw it. She had blonde hair that fell in perfect waves, a laugh that could charm anyone, and a complete inability to see the world beyond the tip of her own nose. My parents didn't see it as a flaw. They called it focused. I was the other one. Alice, the quiet one, the responsible one. I had plain brown hair, a tendency to read books in a corner at parties, and a deep-seated need to make things right. From the beginning, I was cast in a supporting role. My job was to be sensible, to be mature, to clean up the messes Chloe left in her glittering wake. I remember when I was 8, I saved up my allowance for months to buy a telescope. I had a book on constellations, and I would lie in the backyard for hours trying to find Orion's Belt and the Big Dipper. The telescope was my prized possession. Chloe, who was 6, wanted a new bicycle, a pink one with sparkly tassels. My parents told her she had to wait for her birthday. She threw a tantrum that lasted for 2 days. She screamed. She cried. She refused to eat. On the 3rd day, my father came home with the pink bicycle. My birthday came 2 months later. I asked for a new lens for my telescope. My dad patted me on the head. "Maybe next year." "Sweetie," he said. "We had to tighten our belts after buying that bike for your sister." I didn't cry. I just nodded. I understood my role. My desires were flexible. Chloe's were law. This dynamic followed us through school. Chloe struggled with her grades, so my parents hired expensive tutors. When she still only managed a C- on a history paper, my mother framed it and called her a creative thinker. I brought home a straight-A report card, and my mother glanced at it before putting it on the fridge under a pizza coupon. "That's nice, dear," she said, her attention already back on the phone, coordinating Chloe's social schedule. I learned early on that their approval was a finite resource, and it was all allocated to Chloe. So, I stopped trying to win it. Instead, I focused on building something for myself. While Chloe went to a state university on my parents' dime, changing her major 3 times before dropping out to find herself, I worked 2 jobs to put myself through a community college program for hospitality and management. They called it my little hobby. While I was bussing tables and taking night classes, Chloe was finding herself on a trip through Europe, funded by Dad. Her Instagram was filled with pictures of her smiling in front of the Eiffel Tower and drinking wine in Tuscany. Mine was non-existent. I didn't have time for photos. I was busy studying, working, and saving every penny. When I was 22, I took the biggest risk of my life. I used my savings, a little over $10,000, to start my own business, Alice Montgomery Events, LLC. It sounded so official, so grand. In reality, it was just me working from a corner of my tiny apartment with a secondhand laptop. My first clients were friends of friends. I planned baby showers, 30th birthday parties, small anniversary dinners. I did everything myself. I arranged the flowers. I negotiated with the caterers. I sent the invitations. I set up the decorations. And I cleaned up afterward. I worked 18-hour days. I lived on coffee and ramen noodles. But I was building something that was mine. No one could take it away from me. My parents were dismissive. "An event planner?" my father said. His brow furrowed in confusion. "Is that a real job? It's so cute that you have a little passion project." My mother would tell her friends, her voice laced with the same gentle pity she used when talking about a neighbor's sick cat. Chloe was worse. She treated my career like a joke. "So, you're a party planner?" she'd sneer, a smirk playing on her lips. "How fun. Do you make balloon animals?" It hurt. Of course. It always hurt. But I poured that hurt into my work. My business grew. I got bigger clients, corporate events, and eventually, weddings. I developed a reputation for being meticulous, calm under pressure, and endlessly creative. I was good at my job because I had spent a lifetime managing chaos. I knew how to anticipate problems, how to soothe frayed nerves, how to make people feel seen and heard. All the things my own family had never done for me. By the time I was 28, I had a small office, 2 part-time employees, and a portfolio of beautiful, successful events. I owned my own condo. I drove a reliable car that I had paid for in cash. I had built a life for myself. A stable, quiet, successful life. And through it all, Chloe continued to drift. She tried to be a yoga instructor, then a jewelry designer, then a life coach. Nothing ever stuck. She was always starting some new exciting venture that inevitably fizzled out, leaving a trail of debt that my parents would quietly pay off. She lived in a chic apartment downtown, rent subsidized by Dad. She drove a stylish convertible, a birthday gift from Mom. She had everything handed to her. And I had fought for every single thing I owned. And yet, in my family's eyes, she was the success story. I was the strange work-obsessed daughter who didn't know how to have fun. The perpetual supporting act. I had come to accept it. Or so I thought. I had built walls around my heart, thick and high, to protect myself from the constant low-grade pain of their indifference. I kept my interactions with them pleasant but distant. I showed up for holidays, smiled at the right times, and left as soon as I could. Then Chloe got engaged. Her boyfriend Mark was a nice enough guy from a wealthy family. My parents were ecstatic. This was it. The pinnacle of Chloe's achievements. She had landed a good husband. The wedding they declared had to be perfect. A showcase. A testament to the golden child they had raised. And that's when they turned to me. For the first time in my life, they looked at my little hobby and saw a use for it. They saw a way for me to finally be a part of the family story. Not as a character, but as the crew. The request came during a Sunday dinner at my parents' house. The kind of mandatory family gathering I usually endured with quiet resignation. Chloe was flashing her new diamond ring, a gaudy thing that was at least 2 carats. My mother was fluttering around her, topping off her wine and sighing with happiness. My father was beaming, already talking about his future son-in-law's business connections. I was sitting at the end of the table, nursing a glass of water, feeling like a ghost at the feast. Of course, the wedding has to be absolutely perfect, my mother said, clasping her hands together. Chloe deserves the best. The absolute best, my father echoed, nodding firmly. Then all eyes turned to me. It was Chloe who spoke first, her voice dripping with a sweetness that always set my teeth on edge. Alice, she began, giving me a wide, innocent smile. I was thinking, since you do this for a living, you could plan my wedding. It wasn't a question, It was a declaration. My mother immediately jumped in. Oh, what a wonderful idea. It would be so perfect. Who better to plan it than her own sister? It will be your gift to her. My stomach twisted. A gift? She made it sound so simple, so heartfelt. But I knew what it really was. I was a professional event planner. A top-tier wedding planner in my city charged tens of thousands of dollars for their services. A wedding of the scale they were imagining would be a full-time job for the better part of a year. I should have said no. I should have smiled politely and said, "I'd be happy to recommend some excellent planners for you." I should have protected myself, my business, my sanity. But I didn't, because in that moment I saw a flicker of something I had craved my entire life. A chance to be indispensable. A chance to be seen. If I could pull this off, if I could give Chloe the perfect wedding, then maybe, just maybe, they would finally see me. Maybe they would finally appreciate me. It was a stupid, childish hope. The kind I thought I had buried long ago. But there it was. A stubborn weed growing in the cracks of my carefully constructed walls. So I smiled back. A brittle, fragile thing. "Of course," I said. "I'd be happy to." The relief in the room was palpable. They had gotten what they wanted. Free labor disguised as a loving, familial gift. Wonderful. My father boomed. "That will save us a fortune." And just like that, I was hired. The pay was the potential for affection, a currency they had always withheld. The next 9 months were a blur of relentless work. I treated it like any other project, pouring all of my professional expertise into it. I created vision boards, drafted budgets, and built a master spreadsheet with hundreds of line items. But this wasn't like any other project. My client was my sister, which meant the boundaries between professional and personal evaporated immediately. Chloe was the worst client I'd ever had. She was demanding, indecisive, and had an absolute disregard for budgets. She wanted a designer dress that cost more than my car. She wanted a 10-piece band flown in from another state. She wanted a custom-built floral arch made of rare out-of-season orchids. Every time I would gently try to steer her toward a more practical option, she would pout. "But I want it. Alice. It's my special day." My parents were no help. They backed her on everything. When I presented my father with the initial budget projection, he balked. "This is outrageous," he said, his eyes scanning the numbers. "Well, this is what the things Chloe wants will cost," I explained calmly. "We can easily bring this number down if we make some adjustments to the venue or the guest list." No. He cut me off. "The venue and guest list are non-negotiable. You're the planner. You're supposed to get us deals." The message was clear. I was expected to work miracles. I was expected to use my industry connections and my negotiating skills not just to plan the event, but to make it cheaper, to absorb the costs through my own labor and leverage. And I did. I called in favors. I negotiated relentlessly with vendors using the goodwill I had spent years building to get discounts for my sister's wedding that I would never ask for my paying clients. Then came the deposits. The high-end vendors, the historic mansion for the venue, the celebrity chef caterer, the sought-after photographer, all required substantial down payments to secure the date. We're talking thousands of dollars each. When I brought the first one to my father for the venue, he wrote the check without complaint. But when the second and third came for the caterer and photographer, he started to grumble. "This is getting expensive," he said, sighing dramatically as he signed the checks. Chloe was there and she overheard. She immediately looked like she was about to cry. "Daddy, are we going to have to cancel things? I thought you wanted me to have a perfect day." My father's face softened instantly. "Of course not. Princess." He looked at me, an idea dawning in his eyes. "Alice, you're doing so well for yourself with your business. Why don't you chip in? You could cover some of these deposits as your wedding gift." Chloe's face lit up. "Oh, Alice. Would you? That would be the most amazing gift ever." I was cornered. Saying no would make me the villain, the cruel sister who was ruining Chloe's dream. So, I did the only thing I could do. I took a deep breath and opened my wallet. "The photographer is on me," I said, forcing a smile. "Happy to help." It was a $3,000 deposit. A week later, it was the florist. "I'll cover the deposit." I found myself saying another $2,000, then the band, another $3,000. Each time I told myself it was a gift. But it didn't feel like a gift. It felt like an extraction. My family praised my generosity, but their gratitude was shallow. They didn't see it as a sacrifice. They saw it as my duty, my role. I was the responsible one, the one with the stable income. Of course, I should pay. The most crucial decision I made during that time seemed small and technical, a simple matter of professional habit. When I drew up the contracts with the vendors, I listed the client of record as Alice Montgomery Events, LLC. I did it automatically. It was how I protected myself and my clients. It streamlined communication and ensured that all legal and financial responsibility was routed through my company. It gave me control. I never imagined it would become my only escape hatch. I funneled all the payments through my business account, using the checks from my father and my own funds to pay the vendors. It was cleaner that way, more professional. In my master spreadsheet, I meticulously tracked every penny, noting which deposits were paid by Dad and which were gift from Alice. By the time we were a month out from the wedding, I had poured over $10,000 of my own money and hundreds of hours of unpaid labor into the event. I was exhausted. I was running on fumes, juggling my own clients during the day and planning Chloe's wedding at night. But the end was in sight. Everything was booked, confirmed, and paid for. All that was left was to manage the final details and see it through on the day. I thought I had done it. I thought I had finally proven my worth. I had built the perfect day for my sister from the ground up. I had given them everything they asked for and more. I was a fool. I had mistaken my utility for love. And the bill for that mistake was about to come due. The text arrived on a Tuesday. "There's no place for you at the wedding anymore. Sorry." My first reaction was pure, unadulterated shock. It felt like a typo. A joke. A message sent to the wrong person. I stared at my phone, waiting for the follow-up text. Oh my God. Wrong person. Or lol, kidding. It never came. My hands started to tremble. I closed the invoice on my computer screen, the numbers blurring into meaningless squiggles. I stood up and walked to the small window of my office, looking down at the street below. People were walking. Cars were driving. The world was moving on as normal. But my own personal world had just tilted violently off its axis. After 10 minutes of numb silence, my phone rang. It was my mother. I answered, my voice barely a whisper. "Mom." "Alice." "Hi," she said, her tone unnervingly bright and breezy. "Listen, I'm sure you saw Chloe's text. I just want to make sure there are no hard feelings." I was speechless. Hard feelings? My sister had just disinvited me from her wedding. A wedding I had spent the better part of a year planning. A wedding I had poured my own money into. "Mom, what is going on?" I finally managed to ask. She sighed. A long-suffering sound I knew all too well. It was the sigh she used when I was being difficult. "Alice, you have to understand, Chloe is under a lot of stress. The wedding is so close and she just wants everything to be perfect. She's decided she wants a smaller, more intimate wedding party. Just her very closest friends." "I'm her sister," I said, the words feeling hollow and useless. "I know. Honey. But you're always so serious. You bring a certain energy and Chloe just wants to feel light and carefree on her big day. You know how sensitive she is." Sensitive. That was the word they always used for Chloe. She was sensitive, so everyone else had to walk on eggshells. I was responsible, so I was expected to have a spine of steel. The logic was so twisted, so ingrained in our family's DNA that I knew arguing was pointless. Still, I had to try. "So, after all the work I've done, after all the money I've spent, I'm not even allowed to come." My voice cracked on the last word. "Don't be so dramatic," she snapped, her cheerful facade finally dropping. "It's not about you. This is her day. The best thing you can do is be gracious about this and not cause a scene. We need to support Chloe." Support Chloe. The words echoed in my head. Supporting Chloe in this case meant allowing myself to be completely and utterly humiliated. It meant accepting my role as the disposable sister, the behind-the-scenes crew member who wasn't fit to be part of the main event. "I don't understand," I whispered, tears finally welling in my eyes. "There's nothing to understand. she said, her voice cold. It's done. Please. Alice. Don't make this difficult. She hung up. I sank into my chair, the tears now streaming down my face. I cried for the little girl who never got the bike. I cried for the teenager whose report card was ignored. I cried for the young woman who built a business from nothing and still wasn't seen. I cried for the sheer brutal unfairness of it all. I thought that was the lowest I could feel. But the day wasn't over. That evening, my father called. I almost didn't answer. But the thought that he might be calling to apologize to fix this was a tiny, desperate flicker of hope. Alice, he said, his voice gruff. There was no warmth, no sympathy, just business. Hi, Dad, I said, my voice thick from crying. Your mother told me you spoke, he began. Good. So, you understand the situation. Now, there's another matter. Your mother and I have been organizing the family's wedding gift fund. We're collecting from all the aunts and uncles. Since you're no longer involved in the planning and you won't have the expense of attending, we've put you down for a $2,000 contribution. The phone felt slick in my hand. He wasn't calling to comfort me. He wasn't calling to defend me. He was calling to ask me for money. For the wedding? I was now forbidden to attend. The audacity of it was so staggering. It shocked me out of my grief and into a state of cold, clear rage. Let me get this straight, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. You're uninviting me from the wedding, and now you're asking me to help pay for it. It's about contributing to the family, he said, as if that explained everything. It's the right thing to do. We've already told Chloe to expect it, so don't disappoint her. Disappoint her. That was it. That was the moment the last stubborn, foolish shred of hope inside me finally died. I had spent my entire life trying not to disappoint them, trying to earn a crumb of the unconditional love they showered on my sister. And here was the proof of my failure. I wasn't a daughter to them. I wasn't even a person with feelings to be considered. I was a resource, an ATM, a functionary. And now that my function as a planner was complete, they were squeezing me for one last withdrawal before casting me aside. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I had no fight left in me. I just felt a profound, chilling emptiness. I'll think about it, I said, my voice flat and devoid of any emotion. Good, he said, satisfied. Don't take too long. The payment is due by the end of the week. He hung up without saying goodbye. I sat there in the dark of my office for a long time. The anger had subsided, replaced by a strange and terrifying clarity. The invisible contract I had signed at birth. The one where I agreed to be less. To want less. To give more, in exchange for the possibility of love. Was null and void. They had breached it in the most spectacular way possible. They had shown me exactly who they were, And for the first time in my life, I believed them. I was no longer their daughter, no longer their sister. I was a free agent. And they had no idea what that meant. They had no idea that in trying to erase me, they had just given me all the power. For 2 days, I existed in a fog of disbelief and pain. I went through the motions of my life, answering emails from other clients, drinking coffee, pretending to eat. But my mind was stuck in a loop, replaying my mother's dismissive words and my father's callous demand for money. The hurt was a physical thing, a heavy weight pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I ignored the dozens of texts and calls from my parents and Chloe. I didn't have the strength to face their manufactured concern or their inevitable accusations of being too sensitive. I just wanted to be left alone in my misery. I had done my job. I had planned the wedding. If they wanted to remove me from the guest list, fine. I would fade into the background just as I had always done. Part of me, the part that had been conditioned for 28 years to keep the peace, was still prepared to just let it go, to swallow the injustice and let them have their perfect day. Then on Friday morning, Chloe called again. For some reason, I answered. Maybe I was a glutton for punishment. Maybe I just wanted to hear what new layer of cruelty she could possibly add. She didn't even say hello. Her voice was a high-pitched shriek of panic. Alice, you have to fix this. The band just canceled. I blinked. The band. The expensive 10-piece funk band she had insisted on. The one I had spent weeks negotiating with. The one that required a non-refundable $5,000 deposit, half of which I had paid myself. What do you mean they canceled? I asked, my voice flat. They sent me an email. She wailed. Something about the final payment being overdue and their contract being voided. I don't understand any of this. You are supposed to handle it. Of course. The final payment. In my emotional turmoil, I had completely forgotten. The contract stipulated that the final balance was due 1 week before the event. That deadline was yesterday. Since I was no longer the planner, I hadn't made the payment. And since the contract was with my company, the band had contacted me for payment. Not Chloe or my parents. I had ignored their emails, lost in my own haze of grief. I'm not your planner anymore, Chloe, I said, my voice quiet but firm. You uninvited me. Remember? There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head as she struggled to process a world that wasn't revolving around her. Well, this is your fault, she finally exploded, her panic turning instantly to venom. You did this on purpose to ruin my wedding. You are the most selfish, petty, jealous person I have ever met. Jealous? That was her favorite weapon. The idea that my entire existence was just one long, bitter reaction to her shining perfection. For years, that accusation had cut me to the quick because a tiny, shameful part of me had always wondered if it was true. But hearing it now, after everything that had happened, it didn't hurt. It was like watching a child throw a tantrum. The words had no power. "I was always jealous of you," she screamed into the phone. "You couldn't stand that I was getting married, that I was happy. You have your sad little business and your empty apartment, and you just wanted to make me as miserable as you are." I listened to her tirade, a strange calm settling over me. It was the calm that comes when the worst has already happened. There was nothing left to fear, nothing left to lose. She could scream. She could insult me. She could hate me. It didn't matter anymore. The connection between us, the frayed, one-sided rope I had been clinging to my whole life, had finally snapped. I thought about the years I had spent shrinking myself to make her feel bigger. The compliments I had given, the advice I had offered, the secrets I had kept. I had celebrated her triumphs and comforted her through her self-inflicted dramas. I had been a good sister. I had been the only sister I knew how to be. And this was my reward. To be called a monster for not continuing to work for free for the people who had publicly and privately humiliated me. "You need to call them back right now and fix this," she demanded, her voice shrill. "And you need to pay them whatever they want. You owe me this." Owe her. The sheer breathtaking entitlement of that statement was what did it. It was the final clarifying moment, the breaking point. The storm of hurt and confusion in my mind cleared, and what was left was a single, hard, unshakable thought. No. No more fixing. No more paying. No more shrinking. No. No, I said out loud. The word was quiet, but it felt like the loudest sound I had ever made. "What did you say?" Chloe gasped, genuinely shocked. I said no. I repeated a little stronger this time. "I am not your planner. I am not your ATM, and I am not your sister anymore. You are on your own. Figure it out." Before she could respond, before she could unleash another torrent of abuse, I hung up the phone. My hand was trembling, but not from fear or sadness. It was trembling with a strange new energy. Adrenaline power. For the first time in my 28 years, I had chosen myself. I had drawn a line, not in the sand, but in solid rock. I looked at my reflection in the dark screen of my phone. My eyes were red-rimmed from crying, but they were clear. The fog had lifted. I knew exactly what I had to do. They wanted me to disappear. They wanted me to be erased. Fine. But I was going to do it on my own terms. And I was going to take my life, my money, and my self-respect with me. The wedding wasn't my problem anymore. It was just a business deal that had gone bad. And I knew exactly how to handle that. The decision, once made, was liberating. It was as if a 100-pound weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The grief and anger were still there, simmering beneath the surface. But they were now fuel, not anchors. I didn't waste time on tears. I opened my laptop, my fingers flying across the keyboard with a newfound purpose. Chloe's accusation echoed in my head. Your sad little business and your empty apartment. She meant it as an insult. A way to paint me as a lonely failure. But right now, my business and my apartment felt like a fortress. They were mine. I had built them. And they were going to be my salvation. First, I opened a new browser tab and went to an airline website. I typed in my home airport and a destination I had always dreamed of visiting, but never had the time or money for. Hawaii. A place of warmth, sun, and ocean. As far away from the cold drama of my family as I could get, I found a direct flight to Honolulu. It departed at 8 a.m. on Saturday, the day of the wedding. With my escape plan secured, I turned my attention to the mess they had created. My business. My contracts. I pulled up the master folder for the Montgomery wedding. It was all there. Meticulously organized. Every contract. Every invoice. Every payment confirmation. And on every single document, the client name was Alice Montgomery Events LLC. A small, cold smile touched my lips. They had never even bothered to read the paperwork. They just saw me, their family workhorse, and assumed everything was being done in their name. A fatal assumption. Still, I knew I had to handle this carefully. I wasn't a vindictive teenager throwing a tantrum. I was a business owner. I had a reputation to protect. I needed to act professionally, legally, and decisively. I called my friend Kate. Kate was a lawyer. A sharp, non-nonsense woman who had been my rock through years of family drama. She had warned me against planning the wedding for free from the start. Don't do it, Alice, she had said over coffee months ago. It's a trap. They'll bleed you dry and you won't even get a thank you. I hated how right she had been. I explained the situation to her in a calm, even voice. The text, the phone calls, the demand for money, Chloe's screaming fit about the band. Kate listened without interrupting. When I was finished, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. Okay, she finally said, her voice dangerously calm. So, let me get this straight. They fired you from the job, uninvited you from the event, insulted your character, and then demanded you keep working and paying for it. That about sums it up, I said, a dry, humorless laugh escaping my lips. And every contract is under your LLC? She asked. Every single one. I could hear her exhale slowly. Alice, this is not just a family issue anymore. This is a contract dispute. Your LLC as the client is the only entity legally bound by these agreements. Not Chloe. Not your father. You. So, what does that mean? I asked, though I already knew the answer. It means you have every legal right to terminate those contracts. She said the vendors have a contractual obligation to your company, not to your sister. If the client, your LLC, cancels the services, then the terms of cancellation, including any refunds, apply to the client, to you. The word refunds hung in the air. All those deposits. The money from my father. Yes. But also the thousands of dollars of my own money. It would all come back to my business account. They're going to lose their minds, I said softly. That, Kate replied, a hint of steel in her voice, is not your legal problem. You have a fiduciary duty to your own company. Alice, you can't let your business be on the hook for an event you've been fired from. You need to mitigate your losses. Cancel everything immediately. Draft formal cancellation notices and send them via email. Reference the cancellation clause in each contract. Be polite. Be professional. And be final. Her words were like a splash of cold water. She was right. This wasn't about revenge. This was about business. This was about protecting what I had built. They had severed the family ties. I was now simply severing the business ones. I thanked her and hung up the phone. My path crystal clear. I spent the next hour drafting 4 emails. Each one was polite, professional, and utterly impersonal. To the venue. As per Section 4A of our agreement, I am writing to provide formal notification of the cancellation of the event scheduled for this Saturday. To the caterer, please accept this email as the official termination of our contract for the Montgomery wedding. To the florist, to the linen and rental company. Each email was a clean, precise cut. With each click of the send button, I felt another cord being severed. It was a strange feeling. A mix of terror and exhilarating freedom. I was dismantling the perfect day I had so painstakingly built. I was taking back my work. My money. My power. The final email was sent. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair. The office was quiet for the first time in months. There were no frantic calls to make. No fires to put out. No impossible demands to meet. There was just silence. A deep, profound peace settled over me. It wasn't the giddy joy of revenge. It was the quiet, steady calm of justice. They had told me there was no place for me. So, I had removed myself completely. That night, I didn't dream of angry phone calls or my sister's screaming face. I slept soundly and deeply for the first time in almost a year. I dreamt of the ocean. If this story is touching you or feels familiar, please consider subscribing to the channel and sharing the video. It really helps me grow and create more. The beauty of my plan was its silence. There was no dramatic confrontation, no shouting match, no tearful airing of grievances. The old Alice would have craved that. A final messy scene where I could lay out all my pain and force them to finally hear me. But the new Alice, the one who had booked a first-class ticket to Hawaii, understood that the most powerful statements are often made in silence. I had Kate, my lawyer friend, look over the cancellation emails before I sent them. She made a few small tweaks, adding a bit of legal jargon to make them even more ironclad. But she confirmed my plan was sound. "You're not just in the right, Alice," she told me. "You're following standard business practice. This is damage control." It was oddly comforting to have my actions framed that way. This wasn't an emotional outburst. It was a calculated business decision. I sent the emails on Friday afternoon, exactly 1 week before the wedding. I knew most of the vendors would be wrapping up for the weekend and might not see them until Monday. This gave me a few days of peace, a buffer of quiet before the inevitable storm. I used that time to prepare for my trip. I went shopping and bought a new swimsuit and a sundress, things I hadn't done for myself in years. Every small act of self-care felt like a victory. I packed my suitcase, a strange giddiness bubbling up inside me. It felt like I was packing for a new life, leaving the old one folded up and stored away in a dusty attic. As expected, the weekend was quiet. My family, assuming I was sulking in my apartment, left me alone. They were probably relieved, thinking they had successfully managed their difficult daughter problem. They had no idea that the real problem was a series of emails making their way to the top of several inboxes across the city. The storm broke on Monday morning. At 9:15 a.m., the first refund notification hit my business account. It was from the florist. A little over $2,000, the deposit I had paid myself. Seeing that money returned to my account was a tangible confirmation that I had done the right thing. It was my money. It had never truly been a gift because gifts aren't given with the expectation of being treated like a human being. It was a transaction, and the other party had failed to hold up their end of the bargain. Throughout the day, the others followed the rental company, the photographer, the band, who were actually grateful for the early cancellation as they had already booked another more lucrative gig. By Tuesday, over $10,000 of my own money was back where it belonged. On Wednesday, the big one landed. The refund from the venue. My father had paid that deposit. But because the contract was with my LLC, the $20,000 refund was legally routed directly to my business account. I immediately transferred that money into a separate savings account, titling it escrow. It wasn't my money, and I had no intention of keeping it. But I also had no intention of handing it over until this was all settled. It was my only piece of leverage. I spent the rest of the week finalizing details for my actual clients, handing off responsibilities to my 2 trusted employees. I told them I was taking a much-needed last-minute vacation. They were thrilled for me. "You deserve it, Alice," my assistant Sophie said. "You've been so stressed." They had no idea. My phone remained silent until Thursday afternoon, less than 48 hours before the wedding. This was when the vendors, having not heard from anyone else, would have started making follow-up calls to Chloe to confirm final details. This was when my sister would discover that her perfect day was nothing more than a series of calendar appointments on her phone. The first text was from Chloe. It was a single, all-caps question. Did you cancel the venue? I looked at it, took a sip of my herbal tea, and deleted it without responding. A minute later, my phone rang. It was her. I let it go to voicemail. Then my mother called. I let that go to voicemail, too. Then my father. Voicemail. The texts started flooding in. A chaotic symphony of panic and rage. From Chloe. The caterer just called me. They said the wedding is off. What did you do? From Mom. Alice. You need to call me this instant. This is not funny. From Chloe. Answer your phone. You monster. You are ruining my life. From Dad. Whatever stunt you're pulling, it ends now. Call me. I watched the notifications pile up on my lock screen, feeling a strange sense of detachment, as if I were watching a movie. This wasn't my life anymore. This was a mess of their own making. I had simply stepped out of the way and allowed the natural consequences to unfold. They had built their family on a foundation of my silent compliance. By removing that foundation, the whole structure was starting to crumble. My quiet revenge wasn't in the cancellations. It was in the silence that followed. It was in my refusal to be drawn back into their drama. My refusal to fix their problems. My refusal to even acknowledge their existence. I had spent my life being available, reliable, and endlessly accommodating. My absence was now a weapon, and it was more powerful than any angry words could ever be. I turned my phone on silent and put it in a drawer. I finished packing my carry-on, laying out my outfit for the airport in the morning. I watered my plants. I made myself a simple dinner and ate it while watching a comedy on Netflix. For the first time in my life, their chaos wasn't my problem. And that was the sweetest revenge of all. While I was methodically preparing for my escape, a hurricane of panic was tearing through my family's life. I didn't see it firsthand, of course, but I could picture it perfectly. I had been planning events for years. I knew exactly what the 48-hour countdown to a major event looked like. It was a period of frantic last-minute confirmations of checklists and timelines. To discover at that stage that you have no venue, no food, and no flowers is not just a problem. It's a cataclysm. I imagine Chloe was the first to realize the true scale of the disaster. She would have been calling the vendors for her final bridal check-in. The phone call to the venue manager would have been the first domino. Hi. This is Chloe Montgomery, for the Montgomery wedding on Saturday. She would have chirped, expecting a warm, differential response. Instead, she would have been met with a confused silence followed by, "I'm sorry." "Who?" "Let me check the system." Yes. The Montgomery event that was canceled on Monday by the client Alice Montgomery Events. The confusion. The dawning horror. I can almost see the color draining from her face. She would have hung up, her hands trembling, and immediately called the caterer. "Hi. I just wanted to confirm the delivery time for Saturday." Ma'am, we received a cancellation notice for that event. We no longer have you on the schedule. One by one, the pillars of her perfect day would have crumbled into dust. The florist, the rental company, the photographer. Each call would have been a fresh wave of panic. A new confirmation that this wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. It was a systematic dismantling. Her frantic, unanswered calls to me would have turned into screams of frustration. She would have called our parents. Her voice a hysterical shriek. Alice canceled everything. The wedding is ruined. My mother, ever the enabler, would have tried to sue her. Now, sweetie, I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. Your sister is being dramatic. I'll call her and sort it out. But I wouldn't answer. Her calls would go to voicemail. Her authority completely useless for the first time. The power dynamic had shifted. She could no longer command me into submission. My father, a man who believes every problem can be solved with money and intimidation, would have taken a different approach. He would have started calling the vendors himself, ready to bellow and threaten his way back onto their schedules. This is Richard Montgomery. He would have roared into the phone at the venue manager. My daughter's wedding is on Saturday. There's been some kind of mistake. You need to fix it. And the manager, a professional who deals with difficult clients every day, would have calmly replied, "Sir, I'm very sorry, but the contract was with Alice Montgomery Events, and she canceled. We've already booked another event for that day. There is nothing I can do." The finality of it would have enraged him. The realization that his money and his name meant nothing here. The contracts were with me. The power was with me. He would have been utterly, completely impotent. The screaming matches in my parents' house must have been biblical. Chloe weeping and accusing. My mother wringing her hands and trying to perform damage control. My father pacing like a caged animal, his face red with fury, unable to bully his way out of a problem for the first time in his life. They would have been united in their narrative. I was the villain. I was the monster. I had done this out of spite, out of jealousy. It would never occur to them that they had pushed me to this point. In their world, they were the victims of my irrational, cruel betrayal. The true collapse wouldn't have just been logistical. It would have been social. They had spent months bragging about this wedding. It was to be the social event of their circle. They had invited business partners, influential friends, and all the gossipy relatives. Now they had to face the humiliation of calling 200 guests and telling them the wedding was off. What would they say? The truth was too shameful. Our daughter Alice, the one we treated like a servant and then disinvited, was the one holding everything together, and she just pulled the plug. No. They would have to invent a lie. A family emergency. A sudden illness. But the rumors would spread. People would talk. The perfect family image they had so carefully cultivated would be shattered. I could see them all trapped in the wreckage of the perfect day I had built and then taken away. They were screaming my name, blaming me, hating me. But they were screaming into a void. I wasn't there to hear them. I had removed myself from the equation. The chaos was theirs and theirs alone. It was the natural result of their own actions. A debt that had finally come due. And while their world was collapsing, I was in my quiet apartment sipping tea and checking the weather forecast for Honolulu. Sunny with a high of 82 degrees. Perfect! On Friday evening, the night before the wedding was supposed to happen, after more than 24 hours of ignoring a constant barrage of frantic calls and texts, I decided to answer one. I chose my father. Chloe was too hysterical. My mother too manipulative. My father was a pragmatist. He understood power, money, and consequences. He was the only one I could have a real conversation with, even if it was an ugly one. I let the phone ring 3 times, took a deep, calming breath, and answered. "Hello," I said, my voice even and cool. "Alice," he bellowed, the sound so loud and distorted with rage that I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I have some idea," I replied calmly. I was sitting on my sofa, my suitcase packed and waiting by the door. I canceled a series of business contracts for an event I was no longer a part of. "Business contracts," he sputtered. "This is your sister's wedding. Your family. You have destroyed everything." "I didn't destroy anything," I said, my voice remaining steady. This was the most important part. I had to own my actions, but not their narrative. I planned a beautiful wedding. Then I was told there was no place for me at that wedding. So I removed myself. I removed my business. I removed my resources. You cannot fire someone and then expect them to keep working for you. It's really that simple. There was a moment of stunned silence on his end. He was used to me crumbling, apologizing, accepting blame. My calm, logical response had completely thrown him off. "You will fix this," he said, his voice dropping to a low, threatening growl. "You will call every single one of those vendors back and you will get this wedding back on track. You will do it right now." It wasn't a request. It was an order. The order of a man who had never been disobeyed by me in my entire life. I took another sip of my tea. "That's not possible." I said, "The contracts have been terminated. The vendors have moved on. The venue has already been rebooked." "Then you will pay for it," he roared. "You will pay for the damages. This is going to cost us a fortune to fix, not to mention the humiliation." "Actually," I said, a cool edge creeping into my voice, "it won't be costing you anything. In fact, you'll be getting a refund." "What are you talking about?" he snapped. "The refunds for all the canceled services have been processed," I explained as if I were talking to a difficult client. "As per the contracts, they were all routed back to the client on record, which is my company." Alice Montgomery Events. I let that sink in. The silence on the other end of the line was heavier, more profound this time. It was the silence of a powerful man realizing he has been completely outmaneuvered. The silence of checkmate. He finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. The deposit for the venue? It came back to you? Yes, I said, along with the refunds for all the other deposits. The money I paid and the money you paid. It's all back in my business account now. He was speechless. He finally understood. It wasn't just that the wedding was canceled. It was that I had the money. All of it. They had no leverage. They couldn't sue me because I hadn't breached any contracts. I had acted entirely within my legal rights as the client. They couldn't bully me because I was no longer listening. They had lost everything, and I had lost nothing but a family that had never truly been mine. You'll transfer my money back immediately, he stammered, trying to regain some semblance of control. I will have my lawyer contact you next week to arrange the transfer of your portion of the funds, I said, my voice crisp and professional. But for now, I have to go. I have an early flight to catch in the morning. A flight? He asked, his voice full of disbelief. A flight to where? That's really none of your business anymore. Is it? I replied. You wanted a family celebration without me. Well, you got what you wanted. There's nothing but family left. You can all enjoy the harmony. And with that, before he could utter another word, I hung up. I blocked his number. Then I blocked my mother's. Then Chloe's. It was done. For the first time, the silence was truly complete. They had no way to reach me. The last cord was cut. I sat in the quiet of my apartment, not feeling triumphant, not feeling vengeful, just feeling free. The heavy cloak of familial obligation I had worn my entire life had finally slipped from my shoulders. I was light. I was my own, and I was ready to fly. The next morning, the sun rose on what was supposed to be Chloe's wedding day. While my family was likely waking up to a day of shame and frantic phone calls to guests, I was pulling my suitcase through the quiet, early morning calm of the airport. I bought a coffee and a pastry, found my gate, and sat down by the window, watching the planes take off and land. My phone was in my bag, still blissfully silent. I had no desire to turn it on. No curiosity about the fallout from the bomb I had dropped. Their drama was a distant storm, and I was flying away from it. As I sat in the airport lounge waiting to board, a sense of profound peace settled over me. It wasn't the giddy happiness of a vacation. It was something deeper, more solid. It was the quiet, unshakable knowledge that I had saved myself. For years, I had thought that peace meant keeping my family happy, avoiding conflict, and swallowing my own feelings for the sake of harmony. I was wrong. True peace wasn't about appeasing others. It was about honoring myself. It was about having the courage to walk away from people who consistently hurt you, even if they share your blood. When I boarded the plane and found my first-class seat, I sank into the plush leather and looked out the window. The ground crew bustled below, the world carrying on as it always did. As the plane taxied down the runway and then lifted into the air, I watched my city shrink beneath me until it was just a patchwork of buildings and streets. I felt a pang, not of sadness, but of finality. I was leaving a part of my life down there, a version of myself I would never be again. The girl who desperately craved her family's approval was gone. In her place was a woman who was learning to approve of herself. They didn't just lose a wedding planner that week. They lost a daughter. They lost a sister. They lost me completely and forever. The space I had once occupied in their lives, the one they had taken for granted and then tried to erase, was now a permanent void. They would have to learn to live with the consequences of that, just as I was learning to live with the freedom of it. My revenge was never about destroying Chloe's wedding. My revenge was in my own survival. It was in the quiet dignity of removing myself from a toxic equation. It was in the calm of my own heart as I flew towards a new horizon. They tried to tell me there was no place for me. So, I went out and found a place that was all my own. And it was beautiful. If you've ever been made to feel small by the people who should have built you up, if you've ever had to choose your own peace over a toxic family, know that you are not alone. Your strength is not in how much you can endure, but in your courage to say no more. Subscribe and share your story in the comments.